My brother Marcus sent me one last text before he disappeared into Black Ridge National Park. It said, "Trails longer than the map says. Don't worry, I'll be back by dark." That was 19 days ago. The park rangers found his tent on day 3. They never found Marcus. We had been planning the Black Ridge hike for 3 years, ever since Marcus and I scattered our father's ashes on a mountain trail in Colorado and swore to each other that we'd never stop walking wild places together. That was the kind of bond we had. Not the kind where you talk every day, the kind where you don't need to. Marcus was 41. A high school biology teacher who drove a dented Subaru plastered with trail stickers, who could name every bird by its call, who brought extra granola bars for strangers and wrote the distances on his palms in Sharpie before every hike. He was meticulous. He was careful. He was not the kind of man who got lost. The Black Ridge Loop, Trail 9, was listed in every guidebook as a moderate 11.4-mile circuit through old-growth pine forest in the northern Oregon Cascades. 3 to 4 hours, well-marked, popular enough that you'd pass a dozen other hikers on a Saturday morning. Marcus's Trail Journal, Day 1, morning. Set off from the Elk Hollow trailhead at 7:14 a.m., weather clear. Pack weight, 22 pounds. Elevation gain to Summit Lookout, 1,800 feet. Expecting to complete the loop by early afternoon. Everything feels right today. The forest is alive in that particular October way, all amber and rust, and the smell of something deep and old. Dad would have loved this. I was supposed to join him. That's the part that hollows me out at 3 a.m. I had a work deadline. I told him I'd catch the next one. I said, "Go without me, send pictures." He sent 6 pictures. They are beautiful. Rolling forested ridgelines, a creek catching morning light, a raven on a twisted pine. The last photo came at 2:47 p.m., a trail marker, wooden, painted white, half swallowed by moss, the kind parks use to mark distances. The number burned into the wood should have read 11.4. It read 16.2. Trail marker 01, mile 0.0, begin. He texted me that photo with no caption, just a question mark. That was the last message I ever received from my brother. The park ranger who took my missing persons report had a nervous habit. She kept glancing at a laminated map on the wall, then quickly looking away, like she didn't want me to see something on it. When I asked her about it, she said the map was outdated. When I looked anyway, I counted 9 red pins. Each one was labeled with a name and a year. The oldest pin was from 1977. The newest was from last month. I drove the 6 hours to Black Ridge the morning after Marcus went silent. The ranger station sat at the edge of the forest like a frontier post, a low building of rough timber, a gravel lot, a corkboard outside with bear warnings and trail conditions. Everything about it felt performatively normal, the way a person smiles too wide when they're hiding something bad. The ranger's name was Deputy Wren Holloway. Mid-40s, short silver hair pulled back hard, the kind of face that had spent decades in weather. She was professional and sympathetic, and she told me all the right things. Search teams deployed, helicopter sweeps scheduled, the forest was large, but searchers were experienced. She said it all in the measured tone of someone who had said it before. Too many times before. Missing persons file, Black Ridge NP, verified cases. 1977, Gerald Poff, 54, solo hiker, Trail 9. 1989, 2 college students, Trail 9. 1994, Diane Lourdes, trail runner, Trail 9. 2001, the Kimura family, 3 members, Trail 9. 2008, Raymond Cho, 38, experienced mountaineer, Trail 9. 2014, unknown male, trail 9. 2019, Petra Wolf, 29, grad student conducting forest research, trail 9. 2022, redacted. 2023, Marcus Cole, 41, trail 9. 9 hikers, 9 red pins, all on trail 9. All vanished without bodies, without proper explanation, without any pattern the authorities would officially acknowledge. When I pointed to the map and asked Ranger Holloway about the pins, something moved behind her eyes, a flicker, fast and controlled, the way a fire gets smothered before it spreads. Trail 9 has difficult terrain in the back section, ravines, people get turned around. 9 times, I said, in 46 years, only on trail 9? She didn't answer. She refilled her coffee. She told me the search team would update me by evening. She moved the map behind her desk so I couldn't see it anymore, but I had already taken a photograph of it with my phone, zoomed in on every pin, every name. That night, in a motel 6 miles from the park entrance, I sat with my laptop and began pulling threads. News articles, missing persons forums, the kind of local subreddits where people whisper things they can't prove. And I found something, a forum post from 2020, a username I won't repeat, from someone who claimed to be a retired park employee from Blackridge. The post was 8 paragraphs long. The last paragraph had been deleted, but the person who deleted it had left behind a single sentence uncaught before the edit, still visible in a Google cache. The trail measures itself. It always has more distance left than you have daylight to walk. I know what you're thinking. Don't go in. Don't be the person who goes in. But here's what you don't understand. I had my brother's voice memorized, the exact way he said my name, and somewhere in that forest, if he was still breathing, I was the only one coming for him. Sometimes love is just stupidity wearing a headlamp. I entered Trail 9 at 6:52 a.m. on day 4 of Marcus being missing. I told no one. I left a note in my motel room with my sister's phone number and the words, "If I'm not back by dark, call Ranger Holloway." I wore my best boots and carried a GPS unit in addition to my phone. I had a compass, a whistle, 3,000 calories of food, 2 liters of water, a headlamp, and a folding knife. I had done trails like this before. I knew what I was doing. The first 4 miles were staggeringly beautiful and completely ordinary. Old-growth Douglas fir rising like cathedral columns, sword ferns brushing my thighs, a creek running coffee-brown with tannins, birdsong, a mule deer watching me from a ridge, the kind of forest that makes you understand why people consecrate things, why every ancient culture looked at old trees and decided something lived in them. The trail markers confirmed my progress. Mile 1, Mile 2, Mile 3, Mile 4. Each wooden post exactly where the map said it would be, the distance burned cleanly into the wood. Everything was correct. Everything was fine. My field notes. 10:41 a.m. Reached Mile 4 marker at 10:41 a.m. Elapsed time, 3 hours 49 minutes. Pace slightly slower than average. Terrain rougher after Mile 3. GPS confirms position. Map confirmed. Summit lookout should be at Mile 5.7. Weather holding. No sign of other hikers today. The forest is very quiet. Too quiet? No, just morning stillness. Continue forward. I reached the summit lookout at Mile 5.7, exactly as the map promised. I ate half a protein bar and looked out over the valley below. Forested ridges receding into blue distance, a silver thread of river far below. The park spreading in every direction like something the earth hadn't finished dreaming. It was gorgeous, it was enormous, and Marcus was somewhere in it. I called his name. The sound left my mouth and the forest swallowed it whole, the way forests do,
absorbing every decibel into bark and moss and silence. Nothing answered, not even an echo. I began the descent back toward the eastern loop, the back half of the circuit, where the trail wound down through denser forest toward the trailhead. The map said 5.7 miles remained. I checked my GPS. It confirmed 5.7 miles to Elk Hollow trailhead. I walked for 40 minutes. I reached the next trail marker. It said mile 7 of 13.8. Trail marker 07, mile 7.0. Something is wrong. I stopped. I read it again. I checked my GPS. My GPS said I was at mile 4.4 of an 11.4-mile loop. The wooden sign said mile 7 of 13.8. 2 miles had been added to the total while I was walking them. My first instinct was equipment error, a GPS glitch, a wrong trail sign. I told myself these rational things and I kept walking, but my stomach had already understood what my brain was refusing to accept. My stomach was cold and still and absolutely certain. The trail was growing, and I was already inside it.
By mile 9, the trees had changed. Not species, I know my trees, same Douglas fir, same western hemlock, but the light moved through them wrong, too slow, like sunlight in deep water, and the shadows pointed in a direction that had no name on any compass I had ever held. I documented everything. That's the journalist's instinct. When the world goes sideways, write it down. I photographed every trail marker from mile 7 onward, my GPS screen beside each one, the discrepancy growing like a wound. Mile 8 of 15.1, mile 9 of 17.4, mile 10 of 19.9. Each time I reached a new marker, the total distance had increased by between 1.8 and 2.3 miles. There was no consistency except the direction, always longer. Always more trail ahead than there should be. My phone had no signal. My GPS still functioned, but the coordinates it showed placed me in a location I will describe carefully. They placed me approximately 4 miles outside the legal boundary of Black Ridge National Park, in a direction that on any other map would have been a private timber farm. But there was no timber farm around me. There was forest. Old, continuous, enormous, untouched. Forest that the satellite maps said did not exist. My field notes, 3:15 p.m. Sun dropping fast. Calculated I have maybe 2.5 hours of usable daylight. Trail marker reads mile 10 of 19.9, meaning 9.9 miles remain according to the sign. At current pace, that is 4+ hours of walking. I cannot complete the trail before dark. I must consider camping, but something in me does not want to stop moving. Some animal part of me that I normally keep quiet is telling me, do not. By mile 9, the trees had changed. Not species, I know my trees, same Douglas fir, same western hemlock, but the light moved through them wrong, too slow, like sunlight in deep water, and the shadows pointed in a direction that had no name on any compass I had ever held. I documented everything. That's the journalist's instinct. When the world goes sideways, write it down. I photographed every trail marker from mile 7 onward, my GPS screen beside each one, the discrepancy growing like a wound. Mile 8 of 15.1, mile 9 of 17.4, mile 10 of 19.9. Each time I reached a new marker, the total distance had increased by between 1.8 and 2.3 miles. There was no consistency except the direction, always longer, always more trail ahead than there should be. My phone had no signal. My GPS still functioned, but the coordinates it showed placed me in a location I will describe carefully. They placed me approximately 4 miles outside the legal boundary of Black Ridge National Park, in a direction that on any other map would have been a private timber farm. But there was no timber farm around me.
There was forest, old, continuous, enormous, untouched. Forest that the satellite maps said did not exist. My field notes, 3:15 p.m. Sun dropping fast. Calculated I have maybe 2.5 hours of usable daylight. Trail marker reads mile 10 of 19.9, meaning 9.9 miles remain according to the sign. At current pace, that is 4+ hours of walking. I cannot complete the trail before dark. I must consider camping, but something in me does not want to stop moving. Some animal part of me that I normally keep quiet is telling me, do not stop. Do not sleep here. Keep walking. The forest in those extra miles was different in ways I struggle to articulate without sounding unhinged. The ordinary signs of wildlife, scat, tracks, feathers, the small democratic messiness of a living ecosystem had simply stopped. No birds, no squirrel chatter, no insects. The wind moved through the trees, but the trees did not sway, which is a thing I noticed only when I stopped to stare at the canopy and felt the cool air on my face while watching the branches remain completely motionless. And then I saw the cairn. Not a proper trail cairn, a deliberate, careful pile of stones stacked 4 feet high, placed 10 yards off the path in a small clearing. Old stones, lichen-covered, arranged with the obvious labor of many hands over many years. And around it, in a loose circle, driven into the soil at intervals, were small wooden stakes. Each stake had something tied to it, strips of fabric, mostly rotted, a few newer, orange nylon, blue fleece, the particular bright colors of outdoor gear. I recognized one of them, a scrap of deep green wool with a small bare patch sewn onto it. Marcus had a fleece exactly that color. He'd had it for 15 years. He called it his lucky fleece. He never hiked without it. I screamed his name until my throat tore. The forest gave me back nothing but my own voice, growing smaller and smaller the farther it traveled, as if the air itself was eating it. The fabric was freshly tied, not weathered, not stiff. It moved in the windless air with a softness that made no physical sense, as if something had just placed it there, as if something knew I was coming and had left me a message in the only language it had. My brother had been here. My brother was still here, and he had left this where I would find it.
I heard him at mile 14, his voice, unmistakably, calling my name from somewhere deep in the pines, the way he'd called me when we were kids, playing in our grandmother's backyard at dusk, that particular brother frequency that you only carry in your bones. I almost ran toward it. I almost died running toward it. Because the voice was coming from the wrong direction. Marcus's voice was coming from ahead of me, from deeper in. The light had gone amber and low by the time I heard it, that oblique October light that turns forests into stained glass for 20 minutes before it dies entirely. I had been walking for 9 hours. My feet were pain that had become background noise. I had eaten my last food at 2 p.m. I was tired in the specific way that makes you begin negotiating with your own fear, telling it to be quiet so you can function. And then my name in Marcus's voice from somewhere ahead on the trail. Not a shout, a call, easy and familiar, the way he'd say it when he found a good viewpoint and wanted me to catch up. I stopped walking. Every hair on my body stood, not from cold, from the specific primate alarm that the body reserves for moments when the world has broken one of its fundamental rules. Marcus had entered from the same trailhead as me. He had hiked in the same direction. If he had become lost somewhere on this impossible extension of Trail 9, he would be behind me, or beside me, or stationary somewhere in the forest. There was no version of physical reality in which the sound of him should be coming from 200 yards further down the trail, from inside the miles that shouldn't exist. My field notes, 5:48 p.m.
handwriting deteriorating. Heard voice, Marcus, definitely Marcus, coming from ahead on trail, not behind, not beside, ahead. I did not follow it. I am writing this down because I need to remember. Real Marcus would not be ahead of me. Real Marcus would be behind me or stationary. Whatever is ahead of me on this trail that is calling my name is not my brother. It knows his voice. It is using his voice, and it wants me to walk deeper in. I heard it 3 more times over the next hour, each time slightly different. Once it was further away, once so close I spun with the knife open in my hand. Once it came from directly above me, from the canopy, which made a sound come out of me that I am not proud of. In between the calls, there were other sounds, not voices, more foundational than voices. A sound like very slow breathing, so slow it might have been wind, except there was no wind. A low resonance I felt more in my chest than heard with my ears. And once, at the edge of my headlamp beam, the clear impression in soft mud of a footprint, large, barefoot, with too many toes. I am not a person who believes in monsters. I am a person who believes in evidence, in measurable reality, in the boring explanations that almost always turn out to be true. I have spent my adult life believing this, and standing at mile 14 of a trail that should have ended at mile 11.4, listening to my missing brother's voice call to me from a direction that violated the geometry of how he got here. I understood for the first time that believing in measurable reality is a privilege. It is a luxury granted by ordinary experience. When experience stops being ordinary, belief becomes a much fragile thing. The trail wanted me deeper. The trail had learned my name from the man it had already taken.
I turned around at mile 16.9, exactly as Marcus said. And the trail? I swear to you on everything I have left, the trail began shortening behind me. The markers counted backward. By the time I reached the trailhead, my GPS said I had walked 11.4 miles. Exactly 11.4, as if none of the extra miles had ever existed. Except I still had his journal, and I still had the scrap of his green fleece, which I had taken from the stake and folded into my chest pocket, against my heart, where it remains today. I turned around at the moment I read those words, turned before mile 17, and I felt the decision in my body like a door closing. Some part of me wanted to keep going, the part that is made of grief and stubbornness and the fierce refusal to accept any loss as final. I want to be honest about that. I stood at mile 16, and something in that forest made a sound. Not Marcus's voice this time, something older, subsonic, more like a question than a call, and I understood it was offering me a choice that only works once. I chose to go back. I chose the daylight that remained and the miles that were mine and the world that still had my name in it. The walkout was strange in its mercy. The extra miles folded away like a tent being broken down by practiced hands. I watched the markers count down, 16, 15, 14, and each one was closer than it should have been, the impossible distance collapsing like a held breath finally released. I reached the final mile in what felt like 30 minutes of walking. The trees returned to their ordinary scale. The light moved correctly through the branches. A Steller's jay screamed at me from a hemlock. Somewhere distant, a woodpecker drummed. Life resumed its ordinary soundtrack. I walked out of Trail 9 at 7:23 p.m. Ranger Holloway was waiting at the trailhead with a flashlight and an expression I will never forget. Not relief, exactly. Something more complicated. Something that understood exactly where I had been and was quietly, deeply grateful I had come back from it. She didn't ask questions.
She handed me a blanket and a thermos of coffee, and she drove me to the motel without speaking, which was the correct and human thing to do. Before I got out of the truck, she said, very quietly, as if offering something she wasn't authorized to give, "We lost one too. 2019. Petra Wolf. She was our best trail researcher. She would have wanted to stay, if that helps." It didn't help, but it made me feel less alone, which is a different and perhaps more necessary thing. My notes, 6 months later. I have tried to report what I experienced through every legitimate channel I can find. The Park Service opened an investigation and closed it. The Forestry Service says the coordinates I recorded don't correspond to accessible terrain. An academic I contacted, a forest ecologist, said old-growth forest of that scale in that region is not consistent with current land surveys, and offered no further comment. I have Marcus's journal. I have the photographs of trail markers. I have the scrap of green fleece. None of it constitutes proof of anything anyone wants to believe. But I know what I walked into. I know what Marcus chose, and every morning I wake up and I walk outside and I look at whatever sky is available and I think Marcus is in the forest. The forest kept him, and something in him, the part that named every bird, that carried extra granola bars for strangers, that scattered our father's ashes on a mountain and called it holy, something in him was worth keeping. I still hike. I will always hike. It was our language, Marcus's and mine, and I refuse to let grief silence it. But I check trail distances twice now, against 2 different maps. I watch the markers, I count the miles. And when I'm deep in the old forest, when the trees get cathedral tall and the light slows and the birds go quiet, I stop. I listen. I wait to hear if anything is listening back. Once, on a trail in Idaho, 3 months after Black Ridge, I thought I heard it, that subsonic resonance, that breathing. I stood very still and felt it move through my ribcage like an open chord struck on an instrument too large to see. Then I turned around and walked back to the trailhead and drove home and called my sister and told her I loved her. Some miles you walk, some miles you leave for the forest to keep. The trick is knowing which is which before it's too late to choose.